Unity of Houston is an inclusive church where we seek to understand and live the teachings of Jesus and other spiritual masters. At Unity, we welcome all people from all spiritual paths and every walk of life. We celebrate the diversity of our city and of our world, and we teach love, tolerance, and oneness, seeking to live in harmony with open minds and open hearts.
Wherever you are in your spiritual path, you are always welcome at Unity. Join us and discover that the life of your dreams is already within you.
Woohoo! Thank you, Mr. Boris Brett. You're going to have to hold back a little bit because you got a Sunday service to put on. Did you know that? Yeah. You got to hold some reserve, just a little reserve. I don't know what I was thinking to put myself talking after that. So I don't know. Next time I'm going to learn better. But tonight, we're starting off our new series that you heard from Jean Marie. It's Taking Our Next Steps. And what we thought was that we wanted to plan this next quarter, really, the next 3 months, on exploring the spiritual journey. Truly, I think, 365 days of the year, we are exploring our spiritual journey anyway. We might as well be upfront about it, right? And so there are pieces to the journey that don't always look like spiritual stuff. It looks like mess and trouble and upset and other people and all kinds of stuff. And so each week we're going to take a look at some of the human condition, some of the parts that actually are right for the spiritual journey. And sometimes when we're doing our work, when we're really moving, when we're really changing, we upset the apple cart in a lot of ways, and it creates some of that ripple effect in other people's lives that are close to us, because when we change, sometimes we're inviting them to have to shift or make a decision, right? So that's just sort of a prelude to what you might experience in the next 3 months as we kind of explore, and as Jean Marie and I move back and forth. We've asked Jason and DeMarco to weigh in on a piece of that puzzle with us. So each week we're going to be taking a little different tact with it. And tonight I thought I'd start at the beginning, which is really our calling. What we're really doing is taking a look at how it is that we are sort of not just starting off on the spiritual journey. I mean, we can consider that our belly button birth, that's our spiritual journey's begun already. But with intentionality, we can almost always look back at the time, or perhaps we are looking right now at the precipice of an invite into another chapter, into another episode, into another stage, into another upgrade of our spiritual life. And that is just as authentically what I'm saying is our calling, a calling into the wild, into the new adventure. In the classical paradigm of the hero's journey, the first and most important step in receiving a call is the decision to answer it. Joseph Campbell popularized the archetypal journey that we are all on in his book called The Hero with 1,000 Faces. What he says about the hero's journey, listen to this. You enter the forest at the darkest points where there is no path. Where there is a way or a path that you can see, it is someone else's path. You're not on your own path. If you follow someone else's way, you're not going to realize your potential. Now, you may either find these words profoundly liberating, because you know what? Sometimes we're hemmed in by thinking that we have to follow somebody else's path. We got to twist ourselves into a pretzel. We got to look like that. We got to do it on their timeline. Because they succeeded. They got there. They went where we want to go. So clearly, right, that's the path. But in truth, there is no such thing as really being able to fully embody and step into someone else's path. And the more that we try to do it like them, or like anyone, or like other people are chanting in our background, telling us we ought to, the less likely we are that we'll be successful until we shift and change and liberate ourselves into knowing, you know what? I got to do it my way. I got to go this way. I got to go on this time frame. I got to be true to myself. I got to maybe take this detour, or what looks like a detour, because that is actually my real path. On the other hand, the idea that you're going to have to forge your own path and that you can't follow the one you can see and the one that looks successful is terrifying as well, isn't it? OMG. You know, it's like I'm going to have to, if I'm not supposed to do it the way I've seen others do it exactly, or a way that looks like it's going to get me there, then how can I ever figure this out? How can I do this? How can I be expected? And of course, right there at that cusp of asking the question, the answer arises in us. That in fact, we have an internal GPS system. We have an internal guide. We have an inner knowing. We are pre-programmed to unfold a path through us. And by asking the question, by considering that there may be an answer we haven't explored yet, in that moment, the path begins to be revealed at our feet. What has become an important part of my personal ministry, what I identify with deeply, is the opportunity to wake people up to the importance of discovering their calling. To demystify the idea that a calling only comes to elite people, certain people, not everybody, certainly not me, right? That ministers can talk about calling all day long. That you can talk about calling if you are going into some rarefied, special, obvious, beautiful, higher level service of some sort. If your Mother Teresa had a calling, right? But me and my job and my family and the stuff I have to do and the place I've come from, and where is the calling in any of that? Who gets a calling? I'm going to tell you, lean in. If you breathe air, you have a calling. For real. That is for real, 100% for real. Many of you may know that you already are doing your calling. Some of you may already be very clear about what your calling is, and you may have been on this path, aware and working with it and allowing it to work through you for many years. Others may be engaged in something that was at once fulfilling and felt like a calling, or what you would refer to as a calling or a passion perhaps, but maybe over time, maybe changing circumstances, or more than likely, changes in yourself, where it's no longer as fulfilling as it once was. And then others maybe never really thought of yourself as having a calling or being called to anything in particular. I want you to know that a calling is a lifelong soul longing that never goes away. It's an itch that always, always, always leads to a scratch. You've got to find a way to deliver it. You've got to find a way to give it, to do it, to be in that space. At some deep level within you, it is your true identity. At a minimum, I'm not going to speculate about other lives or where you came from or past life or future life or anything. I'm going to tell you it's sufficient to be focused on this life and to know what it is you're here to do now, no matter who your ancestors may have been or what spiritual bleed through may be coming through in this lifetime. I'm all into those things, but I'm going to tell you that those are just fun conversations to have over coffee and cake. They're really fun. But where the rubber meets the road is right underneath your feet. It's the next step. It's the next encounter. It's the next breath. It's the next choice. It's the next idea. It's the next decision. And a calling is not to be confused with a career that you're good at or a job you can do, even if you really, really like it. A calling is a deeper level. You may be meeting your calling or you may be feeding that through your career or through a work that you do or through a hobby, what you think of as a hobby or a volunteer service of some sort. But it is not the job you have or the role you have. Princess Diana epitomized that distinction in these words. She says, "Nothing brings me more happiness than trying to help the most vulnerable people in society. It is a goal and an essential part of my life, a kind of destiny. Whoever is in distress can call on me. I will come running wherever they are." That does not sound like the job description of a princess to me. But that is the essence that I think so many people, millions of people around the world identify with, that archetype that Diana represented in a lot of ways to a lot of people. That sincere vulnerability, openness to love, to mother, to gather in, to heal, to comfort. And who doesn't need a little dose of that or a big dose of it from time to time? She understood at an elemental level who she really was and what her life was really here for. In that regard, in her connection with people. Now, I'm not a career counselor. You can think of me as someone who works at the Spiritual Information Center, okay? You know, you're on a spiritual journey and you come, information, yay, I'm gonna need to find out something. I'm the one that hands you a map of the place, some do's and don'ts maybe, things to try, things to avoid maybe, a few recommendations even. Hey, have you tried that? But you're the one hiking the trails on your own adventure. I send you off with a cheery, have a good trip. I'll be rooting for you. Give me a call, tell me how it was. A calling is a deep cord that runs the length of your soul. And when I say cord, you can think of the rope kind or the musical kind. Whatever resonates with you, sometimes it's a tug, sometimes it's a twang, sometimes it's the perfect sound. Discerning the calling is the path of the spiritual life itself. To drop out of the thinking part of us and into the feeling, and using the feeling part of you to guide you. Now, I want to draw a distinction between some of the things that that could confuse what I'm saying to you. There are people in our lives and sometimes in our own experience where the emotions of our life and acting on our feelings or acting impulsively have gotten us into trouble. I'm not talking about that kind of feeling. I'm not talking about the instinctive need to pull away from anything that scares us or hurts us or causes pain in us. I'm not talking about people who need to act out in the feelings. When I'm talking about the distinction here between emotions and feeling is this. Emotions are the feelings that arise, the sense that arises from a thought. And you can test this by this way. When I have this kind of a thought, I have this kind of a feeling. The feeling immediately arises in it. I hold this thought, I hold that thought, I hold this thought. And you can change, you can feel your feeling, your emotion rather, I'm sorry, I'm mixing that up. The emotion following that. Emotion goes, motion, think of it that way. The emotion goes where the thought is. A feeling, a sensing, a resonance from in the heart, from here, does not necessarily need a thought in order to be recognized. It simply means that you move your attention from your mind, from your thinking, from your intellect, and you allow your attention now to go here. And it's here that you discover a whole different world. And it's wordless. And it's not a thought you conjure. And it's not logical, and it doesn't go if this, then that, and it doesn't go from A to B to C to D, then E. You understand? Even if your emotions do that because they're following a thought process, that's your clue. When you have a feeling from your heart, it's a state of experience all its own. And you find out that a lot of times it could be in contradiction to whatever you've been thinking about. And possibly in contradiction to even the conditions you find yourself in. How many of you have been in perhaps a traumatic situation that is bewildering and uncertain and you didn't know how to move, but yet inside of you, strangely, you had a calm or a peace or a center. Something in you that arose that just said it's going to be all right, even though you had no idea why or how that could be true. That's what lives inside of you all the time. That's your greatness. That's your goodness. When I was considering becoming a minister, when I received my calling, when it came to my awareness that I really might be good at this, I've told this story many times. I've told it in front of Howard Caesar. As many of you know, this is my home church as well. And I was pregnant with my second daughter, and I was coming to church one Sunday, and I was looking out the window, daydreaming, and I said, I could do what Howard does. I could talk on Sunday. I could, counsel people. I could teach class. And at that moment in my life, I had not become a member of this church. I had not read a book. I had not been to a class. I didn't really even know what Howard did when he left the stage. I was just making some stuff up, I thought. And it was my husband, William, and those of you who are in long-term relationships, you know that sometimes the person closest to you is not the first one to jump on the bandwagon with you. Have you need to know that? So I didn't expect this from him, which is why it was so shocking. Instead of going, what? You want to do what? You think you're like Howard? All of my yeah buts. He instead said, you could do that. You'd be good at that. And that idea would not freaking go away. It was boom, right in there. Yeah, you can thank him or get an apology from him, whichever way you want to go, however you feel about that. But I'll tell you that I really, literally I couldn't stop thinking about it. So I went to go talk with the assistant minister, Barbara Smith. Some of you remember Barbara Smith. And the reason I chose her, because I didn't know anybody besides Howard and Diane, because why? Because I only came on Sunday. And I only saw the person who was talking most of the time. I'd seen her, but I didn't really know her. And I had no other relationships. I didn't attend anything else here for like 2-3 years, something like that. And but I picked her because I came out of the Catholic tradition. And in the Catholic tradition, priests are celibate male priests. And I am, in that moment, a pregnant female who aspires to be a minister. And I felt like a walking heresy. And I needed a woman to break it to me gently that that was just not going to work out, you know? I didn't want to go. And that was intuitively, I was going to the safest person I could think, but I had to find out. So I told her, look at me from the chest up. Does this look like a Unity minister to you? And she laughed and she said, yes. And the first thing you might want to do is become a member. And so, and so I did follow through those one step at a time. And I started my spiritual journey in another element, another level, started that moment where I started taking one step at a time. Now, when I was going through this period, I suddenly, I'm talking about the feeling thing again, the feeling part that inhabits us, the wisdom and the clues, the guidance, that when I had this awareness that I was interested in becoming a minister, while it took me several years to get on the path and get really ready to go to actual ministerial school. When we would drive past anything, any church at all, anything that looked like a church, I just felt, why, there's a church right there. It could be the church of the bloody rugged cross. It didn't matter what it was. It wasn't my tradition, faith, or anything. But if I saw anything from the smallest little church with a steeple to the biggest, most ornate of any tradition, my tail would wag. I would just get excited. I was, there's enough. I never noticed how many churches are around here. Something had started to shift in me. Something had started to change. When I was little, I grew up in the Catholic Church. When I was 7 years old, approximately, I started announcing to my family that when I grew up, I was going to be a priest. Now, I was being taught by nuns, and they were definitely in my life, but I had seen what priests do, and I saw what the sisters do, and I liked his job better. And I would keep getting the reaction, little girls don't grow up to be priests, they grow up to be nuns. And I shook my head and I thought, that's all well and good, but I want to do that. And let me tell you what my idea of a priest is. The place where the priest lived in my Catholic school that I grew up in, our church was on that premise, on the same campus, the school was on that campus, and the priest's rectory was also there where they lived. And the priest would sometimes come out of the house and walk across the playground when we were out there playing and throwing balls and all kind of thing. When Father would start to come, walking in his cassock or his black pants and a nice sports shirt, sometimes they did that, but we always knew it was Father coming. And the playground would part like the Red Sea, We would all stop and hold the ball, and we would wait for Father to pass. And he would sometimes try to get the ball from us. But there were times when he would touch you on the head. He would just reach over and he would and I would lean in. I would hope this time I get touched on the head, because in the Catholic Church, the priest's fingers, as part of the ordination process, are wrapped, were tied, and specially blessed. Because these were the only fingers at the time in which I was growing up that could touch the transubstantiated host that was what I believed was the body of Jesus. It was the only fingers. Wasn't before they would put it in your hands, before they would, it went straight from him. He would place it on your tongue. And I couldn't get over the idea that those blessed fingers had just tapped me on the head. And I thought, what a life that must be. That your touch blesses people. That your words are a blessing, that your prayer, that your whole life. I mean, you're on a straight skid straight into heaven. That's how I figured. It takes all the stress out of it, If you just know you're going, no matter what. You can see what I like about Unity, right? So I thought that is really my archetypal image of what being a minister really is. But I didn't know that. It was infilling me. It was patterned in me. Because it's my truest identity. It's not what I do, it's what I do it with. A calling is service to the world. It's not your career, necessarily, unless you are profoundly lucky like I am. My job description is minister at the church, but who I am ministers. It's not what I do for a living. It's how I live. My ministry can take any form, use any medium, as long as I'm coming from my soul. And I'll just tell you, I'm not always coming from my soul, okay? We're not perfect beings. Jean Marie is, but I'm not, you know? Yeah. If you want a little a perfect goal and perfect, you ask her about that. The perfect life. I'm a minister standing in line at HEB, if I'm in the right consciousness, that is. I will have always been a minister. I'm remembering, as I was preparing the talk for this evening, working in the medical laboratory, because when I got disabused of being a priest early on in my life, I forgot about it. And I just had seen a lot of changes in the Catholic Church by the time I was 7 or 8. And Latin had changed to English, the altar had turned around, they were putting the host in your hand or about to, the sisters changed from their, being clothed from head to toe, and they were now wearing street clothes, and everything had changed. And so I was very comfortable with that changing of things. And so I just thought to myself, well, they may not let girls be priests now, but when I grow up, they will. And I figured, 20 years, everything would be different, right? And I never thought about it again. I just let it go. And it wasn't until the aha on the way to church one day that I started down that path. And in my process of really trying to discern it, I got a message: I have been waiting for you a long time. And then I went all the way back to being 7 years old, red tennis shoes, ponytails. And then I remembered I had told everybody from the beginning this is what I was going to do. I just didn't know where it would be. Working in the laboratory at the hospital, Herman Hospital, that's where I met William. Part of the job duty I had in the evening shift was morgue duty, which meant that in addition to being supervisor of that evening, whenever there was a body that needed to be held over and waiting for the funeral home to come get it, the laboratory person on call had to go and open up the morgue and accept the body, get the paperwork, or release it to the funeral home. And I remember it wasn't naturally, nobody liked that job. Nobody liked to do it. I wasn't wild about it. But I was still a practicing Catholic in that time. And even though I would expected to be a laboratory technologist for the rest of my life, because I was good at it and I really enjoyed it, I kept a rosary in my lab coat pocket. I'm not really sure why, but I just did. It was like it was always there and I could reach in my hand and touch it. And so when I did the morgue duty, I remember in particular an intern, maybe a medical student, who'd come from the pediatric ICU carrying pushing a gurney like they usually did for the bodies, but because it came from pediatrics, it was a body carried in a bag. And he was pretty cavalier about it. It's like he was carrying groceries or something. And I was a little taken aback by that. And so when he brought it, and I took it from him, I just held it in both hands, and I carefully put it onto the gurney that would go into the cooler. And I touched my rosary, and I just silently commended the spirit of that child, according to my faith at that time, into the arms of love. And felt the pain of the family and sent them love and gave him the paperwork to sign and the things he needed to do, and I filed the things away. Don't judge him, if you might. When you are in healthcare and when you're working with people in the intimacies and in the tragedies, that working with people in healing and in distress in the emergency room, you have to toughen up. You have to get callous in order to be able to do this work. And being in the lab, I was removed from that. But at the front lines where William worked in the emergency room, I know it pulls on you and you just can't be present to it. And so sometimes those things, you put up a defense and a wall. But for me, I felt an opportunity to be able to let go of somebody and to be able to bless them in a way, not thinking of myself at all as a priest, only as somebody who cared and who knew that spirit mattered. St. Mary Euphrasia said, "Do everything as far as you can for love, and you will see what you are capable of. One can make more progress this way in a year than in 10 by the way of fear." Love, yes, love your calling. For this holy and generous love will impart strength to you so as to enable you to surmount all obstacles. Wilma Rudolph said, Olympic champion, "Never underestimate the power of dreams and the influence of the human spirit. We are all the same in this notion. The potential for greatness lives within each of us." Greatness is not what we do, but the part of us we do it with. Now, do you feel your call? Do you feel what you truly value, what really matters, what is uniquely yours to bring, no matter what you're doing? That you need it and the opportunity to do it as much as you need to breathe air? You need to put yourself in those places, in those situations where you can bring what it is that you do. Julie Garman says this, "Every morning, my husband Rick and I sit on the front porch. Nothing fancy. We drink coffee, we talk, we pray. One bitter cold day, we were in our rocking chairs at dawn. And in the quiet stillness, my man of few words asked me a startling question. Would you still love me if I couldn't fix things?" We'd been married for almost 40 years, the same length of time he'd owned an auto repair business. And it sounded like he needed reassurance, but he'd always appeared confident. He was my rock. What I had to say felt so intimate that my heart grew full. "I'm sorry, I should have told you this a long time ago," I said. "I admire you. You serve people behind the scenes without caring if you receive recognition. Yesterday, you were at church at 5 a.m. to help set things up. After the service, you helped tear things down again. After you finished, you fixed Jamie's leaky roof." He sipped his coffee and looked out into the darkness. "It's no big deal." "Oh, yes, it is. You have the gift of service. You're a mechanical genius. And you're generous. What you do matters. The other day, you stopped to help an elderly woman having car trouble. Last night at Mother's house, you put her broken lamp back together." "Oh, I'm just doing the right thing," he said. I knelt in front of him. When you fix broken things, you're helping to mend broken people. Putting my arms inside his warm coat, I hugged him. And yes, even if you couldn't fix things, I'd still love you.
Thank you for watching this message today. I'd like to invite you to join us in person here on campus at Unity of Houston for Sunday morning or Wednesday evening services. If you can't be with us here on our campus, you can still join us live on Facebook or on our website, unityhouston.org, Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. Central.